This is the puzzling story of Mehran Karimi Nasseri, a refugee who had no home, nowhere to go, and nowhere to stay. While this may seem like an average story of an unfortunate homeless man, that's far from the truth. Nasseri simply wanted to seek shelter, but bureaucracy got in his way. Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris is the second busiest airport in Europe. As it turns out, it was also the home of Mehran Karimi Nasseri for a staggering 18 years. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. The Iranian refugee came to Paris on August 26, 1988, and was set on transferring to a flight headed to the United Kingdom. But when he arrived in London, he was forced to return to Paris and had to stay at the terminal, which he couldn't legally leave either. Days, weeks, months, and years went by, and he seemed less and less like a regular passenger and more like a permanent resident. While some elements of his story remain hazy, there's no denying the fact that he had no choice but to make the airport terminal his home. Nasseri was born in Masjid Soliman, Iran in 1943. His father was a doctor, while his mother was reportedly a nurse from Scotland. An ambitious scholar, he traveled to the United Kingdom and began his academic studies at the University of Bradford in 1973. He participated in the protest against Mohammad Reza Shah, who ended up being overthrown by the Iranian Revolution in 1979. He claimed that because of his political activism, he was expelled from his home country, Iran. But whatever the truth was, he ended up facing an unexpected difficulty when he tried to return to the United Kingdom and seek British citizenship. His official refugee status would have allowed him to do so, but complications along the way barred his entry altogether. He attempted to travel to London in 1988 to finally find a home and become a British citizen. En route through Paris, however, all of his legal documents were lost. Nasseri had a hard time recalling how everything happened. But he remembered a briefcase that was allegedly stolen from him, containing all his paperwork. He ended up arriving in London, but was turned away by local authorities because he couldn't present his passport. He had to take a flight back to Paris, where he was arrested for the same reason. His entry turned out to be legal at the time, but he was unable to leave the terminal. The airport serves as a border between countries. Therefore, without legal documents, he had no choice but to stay. At this point, he realized that he might have to stay there for a long time. Without any outside help, he had no way of sorting out his documents, and he was essentially trapped in the terminal building. Surrounded by his luggage and belongings, Nasseri waited days, weeks until he grasped the severity of his situation. He tried to make the most of his situation and spent his days studying and writing his journal that ended up being over 1,000 pages long. Thankfully, he had no shortage of food or cigarettes, as the airport staff felt responsible to help him out. He was partial to fast food, eating regularly at the local McDonald's. He also kept up with the world's events by reading newspapers and was able to stay groomed by washing himself in the men's restroom. Eventually, the media picked up on his story and he was flocked by journalists. With the attention of the public, help him gain his legal documents back. His hardship touched many people, including civilians who wrote encouraging messages and letters of goodwill to him. At some point, he even received a donation of $100 from Dr. Philip Barkin. He was the chief medical officer of Charles de Gaulle Airport at the time, and he felt compelled to help Nasseri. It was only a matter of time until his case caught the attention of civil law, and the first person to respond was French human rights lawyer Christian Bourget. Bourget was dedicated to resolving Nasseri's problem. It became clear that Belgium needed to issue new documents so that the unfortunate refugee could have a legal nationality again. The problem was that this could only be achieved by Nasseri traveling there in person, which he couldn't do without said documents. This seemed impossible to solve at the time. Due to the special nature of this situation, the government of Belgium decided to send him his new legal documents via mail in 1999, and he was able to gain a residence permit in France. But Nasseri refused to acknowledge this for some reason. This whole ordeal took a toll on his mental health, apparently, but he was also displeased with the name displayed on his new documents. They stated that he is an Iranian citizen and his original name, Mehran Karimi Nasseri. He preferred the name issued by the British government, Sir Alfred Mehran, and wanted British citizenship still. Bourguet, his lawyer, was unhappy with this turn of events, to say the least. He spent 10 long years trying to help him, but Nasseri ended up staying at the terminal. At this point, Nasseri seemed too far gone. He could have just changed his name and nationality later, but he lived in his own mind, his own world, and the airport seemed like a safe haven to him. He had a harder and harder time recollecting the events of his life as they happened, often telling strange stories and false facts about himself. He once said that he originally intended to travel to Sweden and was actually a Swedish citizen. He finally left Charles de Gaulle Airport in 2006, but only because he fell ill. He was transported to a hospital and was eventually released in 2007, by which point he was granted citizenship in France. He stayed at a hotel near the airport for a few months, after which he was moved to a shelter in Paris through EMAS, an international charity organization. His life inspired many documentaries, including the movie called The Terminal in 2004, starring Tom Hanks.